Okay, I think we are live. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Black History Month Community Cares Adoptees to Adoptees Facebook live stream. Our Adoptee to Adoptees talks began last May and was really an effort to just amplify adoptee voices and provide a space to connect, share our unique stories, highlight our diverse experiences, and just explore topics that are very integral to our lives. My name is Ali, and I am a transracial Chinese adoptee and a program manager here at the Park Adoption Community Center. Also joining us are Asiah, Fikirte, Mercedes, all of whom I'm very excited to speak with today, and I'm just really honored to have connected with you all too. They will be speaking about their experiences navigating race and culture in America and diving into the importance of self-preservation and community when it comes to mental health. But would you all mind introducing yourselves?
Yeah, so my name is Asiah. I'm currently located like 45 minutes, an hour out from Rochester, Minnesota. I'm currently a family group conference coordinator at my local county, and I'm also working on my master's degree in social work. My connection to transracial adoption is I'm a transracial adoptee. I had a closed adoption, and I have six other siblings that were not adopted with me, but I was adopted with one of my biological brothers, and we've been together ever since. And I've reconnected with those siblings that I did not get adopted with, and that's been really nice. But I did grow up with white parents in a predominantly white community, so that's been very interesting to navigate throughout the years.
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Fikirte. I'm currently located in downtown Manhattan, New York City. I am a first year at Bates College, and I'm doing it at home. And a brief background. So I'm a transracial adoptee from Ethiopia, and I am the youngest of 4 adopted girls. And I have a brother, but the brother isn't biologically related to any of the adopted children. It's my adoptive mom's son. And I did grow up in a predominantly white environment, but I had 2 sisters from China, another sister from Ethiopia, and a Japanese Chinese mom.
And I'm Mercedes, and I am originally from Minnesota. I live out though in Washington, Southwest Washington, Northern Oregon area now. I currently run a youth substance abuse prevention community coalition, and I am connected to the transracial adoption world. I'm a transracial adoptee myself. From an open adoption, I was adopted and flown up to Minnesota at 3 days old. And I have connection with all of my biological siblings on my bio mom side. Still kind of in the process of trying to figure out who my bio father is and getting connected to that side. It's a long but slow process.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those really fast introductions. And I want to add, for those who are tuning in the last like 10 to 15 minutes, we will be having a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please comment in the comments section. And our amazing Adoptween mentor, Hannah, shout out to Hannah, will be moderating the chat and letting us know. But since we are all located in different parts of the country and have had very different experiences with adoption, I guess my first question was, what was it like for you growing up in different parts of the country? Were you really connected with your culture and yeah, just your experience navigating race?
I can go. For me, I grew up in a predominantly white community. Both my parents are white. All my extended family was white, and I was one of the first people of color in my community. So for me, I think my parents tried really hard when I was young to keep me culturally connected to the best of their abilities. They were really connected to an adoption group. They adopted me through an agency, and the agency was really promoting at the time what they thought was the best standard. So like color blindness, we really should be colorblind, but we should also celebrate Kwanzaa, and we should also like have people connected to this, to their heritage. So it was a lot of mixed messaging. But I did grow up connected to this other group of adoptees when we were young. As we got a little bit older, got into the school age, that kind of fell off. It was something that, kind of fell to the background. And my parents really promoted that color blindness mentality because that's what they were taught was the best standard. And it wasn't till I was like a teenager that that was really challenged.
I would agree with Mercedes. Like for the most part, predominantly white neighborhood. My parents tried to immerse me in all of my culture, Kwanzaa. Like I remember all of that, going to adoption camp, like had all that. But then they weren't colorblind, but like socially, like out in the community, it was a little difficult to connect with hearing different rhetoric for the few Black people in the school and just having that. And I think the biggest struggle for me about realizing like my race and culture was my hair. Like my hair was an ongoing like battle. Not more so like my parents. Like my parents loved my natural hair. It was more so like me like accepting, I don't know, accepting my Black identity and not seeing any positive Black uplifting rhetoric. And so that was ongoing. And up until honestly my first year of college, like it was just such a big struggle. And I got there and I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna transition my hair, do the braids, like grow it out natural. And so that was the biggest part of like accepting me. And I'm glad my parents were always supporting of that, but it just took a little while for me to accept it.
So the really cool thing my mom did is she decided to adopt 2 children from each country, so then that child could have somebody to talk to. Like, I have an older sister who's Ethiopian, and I really learned about the Ethiopian culture through her. And my mom did make an effort. We go to a bunch of Ethiopian camps. There's a church that we used to go to celebrate the new year, and that really helped. Although my external environment, I was one of maybe 3 Black kids in my elementary school, so there was a lot of aggression in the sense of like I was different. And going with the hair, I mean, a lot of people, I did get asked like, can I pet your hair, or like what's up with your hair, or like do you brush it differently? And it was
Can you wash it differently, or like wash it the same? Do you use shampoo and conditioner? Like, sorry.
Our hair is different, like curls, like, but it doesn't mean we do it completely differently. And a lot of my friends either ended up like straightening their hair, or I don't know, I did put my hair up for the longest time just because it does take a lot of work to get the curls. But it was also just because, I mean, when I put my hair up, I couldn't really be bullied, because if I had it out, it was an afro, so people would make fun of it and say like they couldn't see the board, so I was always forced to sit in the back, even though it wasn't like they could just kind of move their seat an inch over. But my sister helped me with kind of the hair aspect because she has big curly hair, so she helped me understand like the type of products and what it actually takes to take care of my hair. And luckily my mom did my braids when I was a kid.
Tying back, sorry, but like as far as hair, I remember you just reminded me, like I would get my hair like basically like Jerry curled process, like just loosening my like curls. And my mom, well, my mom would take me to these appointments, not because she was like, yeah, I don't like your curly hair. It was more so like you're going through like this identity crisis, and I can see like the most I can do right now is just support you until you're ready. But like I look back at pictures and I'm so sad. Like I just feel so sad for myself, like because I wasn't so accepting it. So hearing a friend talk about hair, like it's definitely like the pinnacle point of our identity growing up.
I think hair is a huge piece. I know anytime I've been on a panel like this, like it comes up as a huge point. But I know, like for me, when I was a kid, somebody stopped my mom in a Target and they were like, here's my number and let me know when you want me to come through. And so she came over to my house because that's always safe. You invite strangers into your house. But she taught my mom about the hot comb and taught my mom about all these things, which kind of led my mom to going down the road. And that adoption group eventually brought in somebody to help them learn how to braid and like just doing some of those things to get a little bit more connected. Now, my mom was very slow at braiding. My mom was a very meticulous person. So hair day took a lot longer than like if you go to the shop and you get it done. And growing up in a community where like there's not a deep appreciation for hair, you know, I got sand thrown in my hair and all these things, and I get in trouble all the time because you can't get sand out of braids and things like that. But I think there is like this just huge piece of hair and like connection, how important it was. And like looking back, I'm like, I had a lot of rough hair years with the like lack of understanding, or I talked to so many parents who try whatever they comes up on Google, like all kinds of crazy things. They send their kids, you know, put mayo in their kids' hair, like trying to do something, and like because that's what they read on the internet was good, and now their kids walking around smelling like eggs and like I think it's like that kind of riding a bicycle experience, or building a bike while you're riding it experience.
I do think it's important for transracial adoptee parents to especially if you have a Black child, to make an make an effort, but make sure you have an understanding of how to take care of that specific hair, even if that means like going to a Black like barber shop, or going to like, it's always important to reach out to Black communities, especially because like we know what type of hair products we need to use, and we can't necessarily use like the generic brand. There's like a specific texture that needs to be used. So I think reaching out to, and a lot of agencies and a lot of like Black companies target these, like how to work with Black hair if you have like a Black child, because hair is a big part of our identity.
Yeah.
I think we have like, so unlike when I was a kid, and probably when you guys were kids too, like there was not those resources. You can't hop online and just Google like what to do with my kid's hair. Like there was not Google. It was stopping someone at a Target being like, oh, your kid needs help. Like we gotta do something about that hair.
Yeah, real fast on the topic of identity. I know that Asiah, Mercedes, you mentioned Kwanzaa, and Fikirte, I don't know if you, in your household, you celebrated Asian holidays or Ethiopian holidays, but do you feel like Kwanzaa was sort of enough to sort of get you more invested and connected with your culture? I know for me, really all I did was celebrate Lunar New Year, and it was sort of like this one-off thing, but it never really stuck with me. So I was wondering what your experiences have been like when it comes to those types of cultural aspects.
I like, so much has happened between now and then, so my memory is a little hazy, but I would like to think that I know my parents tried, and I don't want to discredit them. Like I want to say they did a lot more than just Kwanzaa, especially when we first moved into the house. But I think once we got older, it was more so like, all right, you're getting older. You can, reach out to, other Black people if you need. Like we can only do so much. Like we are white, and so we understand if you need like outreaches and things like that. But it more so just like what we wanted to do to immerse ourselves in the culture. But when we were younger, they definitely helped reintroduce us. I remember I went to a elementary school, and basically all I can remember is it was just like a Black celebratory school. Like everywhere I looked on the walls, there was some like poster about, happy to be Black, or like Kwanzaa or just anything like that. And so I think my parents, knowing that I like experienced that already, they were like, okay, like we want to continue this in what ways we can, but also recognizing that it gets to a point where we have to step back and you take it into your own hands what you need, and we'll be here. Sorry if that didn't really answer your question.
I think for me, I had kind of the opposite experience. Like Kwanzaa was the things I remember about Kwanzaa is that we would go to the history museum once a year and we'd make like little boxes or we decorate little things, and like that's what stuck out to me. The word Kwanzaa really didn't register with me until I got older and like started to associate one experience with the other. It was just a fun thing that we got to do. We got to go to the history museum. Like that was what I was looking forward to. And so I think as far as like being connected to culture, there wasn't a lot of it. I think, again, my parents really had this being driven home to them that color blindness was the best thing. It's the best that we just assimilate. We should just assimilate into the culture. If we focus on it too much, it'll promote this separation. You know, we really want our child to feel connected. So if we talk about the fact that you're Black and we're white, then even though everyone can see it and we all see it and we all recognize it, if we talk about it, it'll then make this more, create the separation between the two of us. And I think the lack of talking about it was what really like started to create more separation until we started to really embrace the fact that differences are good and like differences are beautiful, and like it does take all these things. This melting pot is great in our household, but it took a lot to come back full circle.
I didn't really celebrate the religious holidays of the Ethiopian community. We did go to a church usually once a year to celebrate the spring, and we also went to an Ethiopian culture camp. So I did get that type of, not a celebration of a religious, but celebration of like everyone being together and having like a big meal, which was really nice. And I went to an all Chinese elementary school and a after school program, so I did learn a lot about like Lunar New Year, and I did do those dances with the dragon, and there's a Native American museum near me, so we did go to the Native American museum and celebrate Native American history in the U.S. So I did get to celebrate other cultures, and I don't know, we weren't really big on those big traditional holidays.
So, on the topic of sort of just being a part of a lot of different cultures, especially as adoptees, I guess as for myself as a transracial adoptee, I always find myself navigating different cultures simultaneously. Being Asian and white culture, Chinese adoptee, navigating Chinese culture. Do you have any advice for how to navigate the many different cultures that are a part of you? Or do you have like any distinct experiences that come to mind when you're sort of occupying this like insider and outsider role all the time?
I would say the division for me is when all the college applications or any application, it says like, what race are you? And it says Black or African American. And sometimes I want to embrace my Ethiopian culture more, but I'm also like, because like if a police stops me, they're not going to be like, oh, you're Ethiopian. They're going to be like, no, you're Black. Like they can't tell the difference. And so it's hard to kind of fully embrace your culture when you're instantly labeled as this one like Black that covers all types of Blackness, when it's really like the different, like a melting pot of all different types of Blackness that should be celebrated in each individual way.
I don't know how to answer that. Like, how do I have any advice on how to navigate? I mean, it's just been a touch and go. Like, I mean, I would say for the most part, I still am immersed in just like a predominantly white culture. even the town I live in now. And I don't know, I'm still learning how to navigate that myself, like through social media, through changing my social media to just uplift Black voices or Black media or anything like that, or, you know, any Black people I see on campus, like making sure that I have a connection somehow, some way, whether that's just like the walk by and it's a smile and then you're good to go. But I don't know, I'm still lacking Black connections, like, you know, and so that's something I'm still craving and working towards. And so I don't know how to answer that other than I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
Little steps are important. I don't think
Yeah.
I necessarily answered the question, but what I try to do now is now colleges and applications are trying to be more inclusive and adding other boxes. So I do try to put other and type Ethiopian to kind of gain that identity of mine.
I agree. I think for me, that like checkbox experience was like the pivotal moment that I remember. I know when I was like 13, that was a big thing like that happened in my experience, I guess. And so I think when I was like at the doctor's office or something with my mom, you know, there was a box and you had to pick just one. And I'm mixed race, so I'm Black, I'm white, and I'm Latina, and I'm all of those things equally represented, but I had to pick one. And my mom was not helping the situation at all because I'm having a crisis over here of identity. Like, I don't know which one to pick. And she's like, well, and every time I go to like get closer to a box, she's like, well, what about this side of you? Well, what about your white heritage? And what about your Latina side? And I'm like, the world sees me, people just say I'm Black or just assume I'm Black. So I'm gonna check the Black box. And it was like just this frustrating experience of like, why do I have to just pick one? I'm not just one of these things. If you pulled me apart and you were to make the recipe of me, you need a little bit of each of these things to really build who I am. So I think for me, that was a big experience. And I think I've struggled with that, how to get connected to that for a long time. I think the other piece of it is as we grow up, you know, people have this expectation of how you should fit in depending on the circles you're in. Like as I start to get into like my white friends, I'm too Black for my white friends, I'm too white for my Black friends. Like we get teased, and then you don't necessarily fit in to one of these culture boxes. So I think one of the things that I've really done is started to create good boundaries for myself. And I think the other thing is as you start to embrace some of the different parts of your culture, people may feel like you're rejecting aspects of the culture that you grew up with, which isn't necessarily the case. I don't think it's just that like you're exploring other elements. And I think part of like drawing good boundaries and
Oh no, Mercedes, I think you froze. We'll wait a moment and see if she jumps back on. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I feel like my internet just kind of cuts in and out.
It's okay.
But I was just saying that I think like being okay, maybe hurting someone's feelings a little bit or letting somebody sit in their own feelings, so that you can really learn about your own culture and learn about who you are, because it's not about what other people's feelings are on the matter. And I think like the more confident you become in learning who you are and deciding what pieces of yourself you want to put forward, people embrace that or they don't. And you have to kind of pick that for yourself. And I think that's like a huge boundaries piece that we struggle with. Because I think as an adoptee and as somebody who's trying to fit into these multiple cultures, I think, I don't know about you guys, maybe you guys can speak to this. I think sometimes we try so hard to fit in that we're willing to give up pieces of ourselves, or we're willing to just like let things slide because we don't want to ruffle feathers. I think being okay like ruffling feathers a little bit to build your good boundaries and have some protective factors is important.
Yeah.
Sorry, Vicky.
You can go.
I actually, now that the more you guys talk, like I do agree retrospectively. I more so look toward in myself rather than externally. But one of the ways that I did it was I did like a 23andMe DNA test just to figure out like all of me. And the results I got were amazing. Like one of the things I found out was that I'm mostly Nigerian, which I would have never like, I honestly just thought I was Black and I just didn't want to look further into that. But then like throughout the years, I'm just like, like I want to get more connected. And so one of the ways I did that was through music. So I just immersed myself in a bunch of different music. And like, even before that 23andMe test, I was like, like I want to get into Afrobeats. Like I want to listen to, the new artists like Burna Boy, which I'm obsessed with now, and I love them. But like doing those little steps for me and getting more comfortable, not only listening to that music by myself, but also playing it around my white friends. Like that was harder than I thought because I was like, wow, like this is new. Like I don't want to get judged. Like Mercedes said, like how much of myself am I willing to lose to fit in? And so taking those little steps just helps me feel a bit more confident in myself, which at the end of the day is most important um, for how I want to interact. So
Yeah, I agree with what Mercedes was saying, my experience, because I did go to a predominantly Asian elementary school, and then I also went to a predominantly white middle school where for like 3 months of my 8th grade we talked about slavery, and I was like one of 2 Black people in the class, so it was a bit
comfortable.
yeah, it's but I did, when you grow up in a predominantly white environment and you're like one of the few people of color, you do have a tendency to get like whitewashed and very like you lose your sense of culture. But when I like went to my high school and I met a lot of Black people, I was like I felt like I was able to regain part of like my blackness. Like I didn't need to, like I could do my hair and not feel judged, or I can like talk to my friends about like our experiences being around white people, and it's allowed me to kind of, I don't have to have that filter anymore, and I've become really confident. Also, it's really fun having no filter, because if like
Yeah.
if somebody's like being disrespectful to you, you're just like no.
I
I
agree.
think for me, like it was that huge like experience of almost like imposter syndrome, and I still think I face it sometimes. Like embracing your culture, like this isn't right that I feel like an imposter in my own culture experience, like or like I have to be 2 different people. As like I'm out in the world, I can be this person, but when I come home or come back to my community, like I have to reassimilate. And I think like starting to let go of some of those things and letting people like really embrace, this has always been me. This is just like been me, maybe like hidden under my little protective shell. And like now I am just who I am in all of my spheres and all of my spaces. And you embrace it, or there's the door.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I love just how as we've grown up, we've learned to embrace parts of our identities that maybe we've like pushed away just because of our environmental factors. And as we transition into different environments, um, I mean, it can be challenging because you don't have that safety net that you had growing up, since people don't know you. And I guess, Asia, you sort of talked about getting more connected through taking 23andMe, and then you found out that you were a percentage of Nigerian and you got more into like Afro music, and you started playing it for some of your white friends. And it just reminded me of this conversation I had the other day with a friend about this like weird dissonance of wanting to be supported by people not a part of your racial group, especially as we're growing and they're not there with you through some of these really important moments of coming into your identity, but not sometimes knowing if those people in your life are going to navigate those conversations in a productive way. And I guess in terms of if they're not supporting us in the way that we want them to, and we're not over exercising too much like emotional labor of educating them. So I don't know if you have any experiences, or how have you navigated some of those conversations about race and culture among family, friends, or peers, and how has it sort of changed throughout your life?
I remember right around George Floyd's death. I remember which hurt. I clicked on the video and I didn't even mean to really. And it just like sparked this ongoing anger and frustration and like advocacy, which I've always had in me, but I was just kind of fed up. And so throughout that time, I was just so unapologetic. Like I didn't really have room for anyone who wasn't willing to grow or realize as fast as I was, that this has been an ongoing frustration for me. And sure, yeah, I might have like pushed it down to the ground, but like I remember with family, like growing up, I was just like this little kid. So there weren't a lot of those conversations happening around race and with society and things like that. So then once everything started happening, I finally like felt like I had the opportunity to speak my mind. And so it all just like word vomited out like my frustrations and how like, yeah, you're family, but like I don't have time for this. Like I will tell you how I feel, and especially with friends and stuff, I was so worried that they would see me as Asia, as their friend, but not as Asia, their friend, the Black woman who's going through something changing, like life changing. And my conversations, I just was so mistrustful. And you know, I guess I didn't really consider whether my friends or family, like their ability to have those conversations. Like I just wanted it to happen either way because it was about time. And I felt like things were being pushed under the rug. And so it just kind of came out. And, luckily everyone around me understood what I was going through and didn't push me or anything like that. And so navigating those conversations, luckily, which for some like didn't turn out very well, but for me, turned out well. And I have a great support system as far as, that changing identity and realizing I'm Nigerian. Like my friends for gifts got me like traditional clothes and things like that. So like I see people around me trying to shift and change with my identity, but also now they know the new me is new me. Doesn't have the space for people who are colorblind or who don't want to play devil's advocate or anything like that. So I'm lucky I have people who understand that. Sorry, that was a tangent.
I think for me, this was like the experience of George Floyd and stuff. It's always been this whole conversation, I guess, having conversations about race has always been a challenge in my community. And just because there's such a lack of understanding, when there was like 11 people of color in my grade of my graduating class of 350, the lack of experience or lack of people who had a different experience than your own was just not there. And then within our community, like I think I definitely had experiences of blatant racism, but most of my experiences were microaggressions and were things that got to a point where you became the bad guy if you called out somebody on a microaggression, because that's not how they meant it. That's not how they meant it. They're not a bad person. They're not a racist. Like you're just being too sensitive. So I kind of grew up my whole life being too sensitive. And so then you kind of have to like pick your battles. So I think this year, understanding just where a lot of people in my life are at, being open to having various conversations. I think one of the shows that has like gotten me through it in like the most satirical way is, I love the show Blackish. I will say go watch it all the time. If you have not seen, there's a new episode out, something about Ask Gary. it really talks about how all of a sudden George Floyd's murder happened. Everyone saw this video and all of a sudden people were outraged and they were calling their Black friends and they're like, oh my gosh, do you know that, like, do you realize how badly we treat Black people in this country? And it is an outrage. And I am like, thank you for enlightening me. Like, again, I've like one more experience, like I get to be enlightened too. And so like getting to walk with some of my friends through the first full circle moment and like knowing, I think having the mindset of like the right intention is there. It really is coming from a place of good intention, but there's still a lot of learning and growth. And I think like it's that hard mix, like Asiah said, where like you just feel so outraged some days and you just want to like scream and punch a wall and like, why are you not here and why don't you get this? But also having the understanding of like I was here once too, or at various subjects, like I had to learn and grow in my own way. So I think for me, there's been a lot of that, like pointing people in other directions, because I really do get to a point where I get burnt out on like being the educator or like feeling like this learning is on my back, my experiences, or I have to be constantly vulnerable, or now people are willing to hear my experiences when maybe we've already sat down and had this conversation and I was the bad guy in it.
Oh my God, yes.
And so like, I think just the number of times that like that has come full circle and you want to be here. I do want to be here. Like I want to see you grow through this, but I can't be the one that carries you through this. Like, let me point you to some other resources. Like, let me get you to some other places.
The strong Black woman trope.
Right.
I realized that it shut me down. I had an experience with a friend and I was trying to be vulnerable and I was sad that day and they took me as mad and I was like, I am going through something, like I'm so broken down, like I can't, these months I'm over it, like I'm burnt out and I'm just, don't do that, like please. So yeah, I can relate so bad.
I think the issue sometimes is education, like educating people about the struggles, like a Black push. Like I don't know a thing about, like I wasn't a slave, so I can't talk about slavery. But every time somebody mentions slavery, they turn to the Black person like, oh, like, we don't experience that.
Like we're waiting for you to say something, like speak.
Or like when like George Floyd or anything that happens, they kind of turn to their Black friends and they kind of, I understand that they're asking like, how are you? But it's also like, don't ask if you're really not trying to, like, if I say I'm not doing well, then actually ask questions and try to help. Like I read an article that was also like, after George Floyd, instead of turning to your Black friends, just like Venmo them $5 or $10. And just because, I mean, everyone's, especially with like my high school, when all of that happened, they turned to like the BSU and they were like, let's start a conversation. But it's like, why don't we turn to the teachers who like talk, I mean, I'm like the history teachers who talk about like American history, but they talk of it from like the white savior narrative, or the what is it, lost cause narrative of like the South is like whites are superior and Blacks are always inferior. And it was just like, we need to change how we educate people, not so it's Black people doing all the telling, it's all on responsibility of us, but it's also responsibility on you to learn and to change. Like I don't like performative action. I hate when people are like, yeah, like George Floyd, like the Black Square, all of this, and then go around and still like not care. It's just like, don't fake it. If you genuinely don't care about like Black people, don't be my friend. If you care, then you can be my friend.
I think there's,
sorry, Sadie's go.
I was going to say, I just think it's for some reason, and we've had this conversation even with other adoptees who are trying to be professionals in the field, it is so hard to play both fears and to be taken seriously. And I know for me, like when it came to growing up and sharing some of my experiences, I think the other thing is when people walk with you and they witness it, we both had the same experience, we both might have been in the same room having that same conversation, or the teacher turned to me and was talking about slavery, and like it just went right over your head. You didn't experience that. As where like I noticed I was being talked to the whole time, and I was being referred to, like, just to like fact check, like you'd say something and then look my way, and I'm like, I wasn't there. Like, you're much older than I am. You're much closer to this time. Like, and, so I think, like, being taken seriously in your own spheres, and the number of times that I have had these conversations where I get frustrated and they're like, well, that wasn't how it happened, and that isn't how it looked. I'm like, well, just because that was your experience, that doesn't mean it was mine. And this isn't how I interpreted it. This wasn't my experience of that situation. And then I think the farther you get from something, people just assume, like, well, overall, you had a good upbringing. And I'm not discrediting that I didn't have a safe environment, that I didn't have food on my table, that I didn't get these things, but I did still experience these experiences of racism. And I think my work has brought me to, like, working in really urban areas, a lot of inner cities, and a lot of really predominantly Black communities. And so then we experience racism in a totally different way. And I remember having a conversation with a young person who was like, well, you don't get it. And I was like, no, the difference is, like, you have aunties and uncles and all these people that are showing up to advocate for you because your experience, like, they get it. You don't even have to say anything. I have to convince 3 or 4 people up the chain. My parents, I have to convince, my friends, I have to convince whomever to see my experience, to validate it. And now it's a problem. And I think, like, that's the hardest thing, is that and like with a lot of my friends, we've had to have that conversation. I don't need a white person to confirm that my experience was a racist experience for it to be taken seriously. Like, that's a problem of racism right there. And I think, like, that's been a really big growth part. We've, like, reflected on a lot of things that happened even growing up, small things. While they weren't, like, huge and significant, they didn't change, like, most people's perspective on life. They were small things that I've carried with me. And so I think it's been a process of healing.
I think with transracial adoptees, going back to that aspect, if you, like, white parents, like, luckily my mom, like, when I told her, like, people made comments about my hair, or like an adult made a racist comment, luckily, like, it just went over my head, and I knew it was kind of wrong, but everyone else was laughing, so I was like, okay, I guess I should laugh. But luckily she was, like, a mama bear, and kind of just, like, didn't go after them, but was like, you can't say that to my child, like, it's not right. And I think when you have somebody, even if they're not, like, Black, but I'm talking about parents, sorry, when you have, like, a white parent, it is important to, like, recognize your power too in this system, because, like, I don't know, sometimes people don't have a tendency to pay, like, a lot of attention to what's going on in the Black community, or it's harder for Blacks to advocate for what they want. But when there's, like, a white person with power who cares, and then will use your words and use your advocacy to help actually solve the problem, that's good.
One thing I will say, this summer, my parents were very patient, but one pivotal moment was during my point of, like, social justice and social advocacy and all those things, which again were normal for me, but were just heightened this year. I was nervous about holding conversations with my parents, and not, like, I knew that it wouldn't be an issue, but it was still nerve-wracking because they are white, and I was experiencing something different, and they were just experiencing it vicariously, per se. And so I remember when I was going to protests in the city, I was at college, but I got a call or text from my dad talking about, like, oh, your brother wants to go to the cities, blah, 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 to protest. And right off the bat, I got protective because I was worried that he was saying that he shouldn't go. And I was like, well, who are you? Like, I love you, but who are you to tell this Black man that he can't support his community in the cities, blah, blah. And it just turned out that my dad just wanted him to be safe and asking me different like ways he can travel to the city to get there. That one moment I was like, wow, like I'm really like all my defenses are up, like even with my parents, like, um, and so, I'm very thankful that, especially during that time, my parents were just like, you know what, like, we support you. Like, if you need anything, we're here. Like, we just want you to be safe. But go ahead, protest your heart out. Like, we're here for you. So, um, but overall, I agree with what everyone was saying. It's been difficult and exhausting, but a learning experience, all in all. And I'm more confident with myself, tying it back to one of your first questions. Like, I know I'm getting to know myself, and I'm proud to be Black and proud to have my white friends, my white parents, all those things. Um, and them knowing that this is me and I'm coming to terms with that. And as Sadie said, there's the door if need be, but I would love to have you, but if you need to go, you can go.
How have you guys dealt with like everything, but with your mental health? Like, have you guys just shut off all your phones and just sat and watched like Blackish, or sat and watched some random show for like a whole day and kind of block yourself from everything going on? Do you limit the amount of times you, or the amount of hours you can spend on social media?
My mental health has been so up and down because honestly, it's just been such a prolonged identity crisis. And so like all of the stuff I was experiencing recently, mixed with childhood stuff, mixed with elementary school, like it makes sense why I would be struggling a little bit, but I coped with Grey's Anatomy, like like music, reading, whatever I can, like to, if it means laying in bed for a couple hours, taking like noon naps, like I'll do that. But with COVID, it's also like I get my energy from other people. Like I love seeing my friends and family and all of that. And so with that gone, like I really have to rely on just TikTok or YouTube or video chatting with people or anything like that, or music. But it's even that, it's hard to describe what I do because it's just a mosh podge of like normal living with the exception of no people.
I think you're totally on point, Asia. I think when I came to this experience, I know I had maybe a little bit of different experience. I didn't have quite as much support. Um, there's just a lot of lack of understanding. And with it being so close to home, like I worked in this community, I knew George Floyd, and I knew a lot of people that were connected to him. So the experience I think was so big. And then living in like going from like being in a community where I knew everybody and I was connected, like I probably would have been at all the protests and I probably would have been doing a lot of the things, to being kind of removed was different. And then to hearing just so many people that I grew up with, like saying just awful things and thinking like, just feeling like really hypocritical. These are the people I went to church with that talk, all day about all the good things that you should do for people in communities. And here's the things that you're saying. And I think one of the biggest things is, again, like really establishing good boundaries and realizing like there's, I will say it a million times, like there is no point in getting in an argument with somebody over social media because it goes nowhere ever. And the only thing it does is like just tear your soul down. And so I realized like, for me, like probably the best moment was I sat down and spent like hours. I think I deleted like 1,000 Facebook friends. And when I got done, I was like, oh my gosh, this feels good. Like this feels like very relieving. It's like going through your house and like doing that deep cleanse, and you got rid of all your junk and it's now in the trash and you don't have to deal with it. Because I think I'd much rather have a conversation with you in person, because half the things that you're going to say online you wouldn't say to my face.
Mm-hmm.
And I am pretty comfortable articulating what I want to say to you about an issue, like without attacking you as a person. And when it like you add that anonymity behind a screen, start to attack people like personally, and instead of talking about an issue that you maybe are disagreeing on. I think my other thing, like I've done a good job of, is really like establishing a good friend group, being able to talk to people, knowing who I can talk to and knowing who will support me as we're having these conversations.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many good points that you all made, and I want to talk more about them, but I know that people have been submitting questions into the comment boxes, so I did want to move time for Q&A. So I guess unselfishly, we'll move to Q&A because that's what it's like.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
So someone asked, too sensitive, and we have quite a few questions. So if one of you just wants to answer it, and then if we have enough time, we can sort of just go back around too. But someone asked, too sensitive is subjective. How do you determine if you are truly being too sensitive versus others are being unwilling to be bothered?
I would say for me, I have like 3 really close friends who I know are really level-headed, who have a really good like central ground, and who all come from very different backgrounds and perspectives. If I run something past them,
Oh no.
Oh no.
She froze.
She'll be back.
Come back.
Come back. Dear Zoom gods, please.
Oh no.
lost me.
Oh, here she is.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I just said that I usually run it past like my 2 or 3 friends who I know are like super stable. And if I get the response back from like 3 people from 3 different walks of life, then they're like, you know what? Yeah, that was like a little out of pocket. Then I know like I'm in the right and I should address this. If I get mixed reviews, like maybe I need to sit with it a little bit. But if everybody comes back and is like, you know, I think maybe you're being a little overly sensitive, like I got to figure out where that's coming from and why that send that for me.
Yeah, I remember like in college reading this, I think it was Bell Hooks, I'm not entirely sure, but how this idea of like being too sensitive, it's a form of paranoia to perpetuate systems of racism and white supremacy, because you think you're being too sensitive, but in reality, it's everyone around you who needs to like elevate their sensitivity and their empathy for other people. Another question is, what does activism mean to you? We've talked a lot about navigating different spaces and different aspects of your identity, and I'm curious how that affects your view of activism and advocacy.
An type of activism I do, besides like going to protests, is I use kind of social media as a way to reach more people, because you can nowadays. And what I do, I have a mental illness awareness account that I have, and for what I'm trying to do now is address mental illness within the Black community and within a lot of communities, because there is a stigma behind it. So I talk about how police have reacted to wellness calls, and how they've interacted with people who are having an emotional breakdown, and their response to it, to bring awareness to it. And sometimes, you know, I mean, I research all these stories, and there's names and names and names of these people, and it's just, I don't know, sometimes I am irritated and I am upset, and sometimes I do break down, because I mean, I'm human. But I think every time like somebody comments on it and says like, this is amazing, like I wish I knew about this, or like I can see how many people like have looked at the post, it reminds me that my form of advocacy in this field is vital.
Another question is, how involved do you feel your parents and your family need to be in being involved in identity experiences, cultural camps, hair, skincare, music, protests, etc.?
I don't know about you guys, but I feel like for me, it's changed at various times in my life at how involved I needed my parents to be I think as an adult and actually leaving the house, I also like felt this really huge, I thought I knew who I was. And then I left the house and I went out into the world, and there were people that looked different than me and people that looked like me that I didn't relate to. And I was trying to navigate this fear. And so I think at that point, that was a pivotal point. I really did need my parents to be on board. Like, I need you to be on board with this crisis I'm having. Again, I think as adoptees, we go through existential crises at various points of trying to figure out who our identity is. And I think as an adult, and I will say this all the time, I think parenting an adoptee almost starts more into adulthood. I think it's where a lot of adult parent relationships fall apart, is if parents aren't ready and they're not preparing themselves for their child to leave the home and to all of a sudden go through this cultural experience of I'm out in the world and I'm identifying who I am a little bit differently than most other people, I guess maybe our other friends who are come from their first families and never had that experience.
Mm-hmm. I agree a lot.
Another question, and this was pre-submitted. Did you always have an affinity for Blackness and for things that are a part of your just like Black culture, birth culture, especially living in or just experiencing a lot of like white culture growing up?
I think because I did have an Ethiopian sister, you know, my building doesn't have that many, even when I think about it, like that many Black adults or children. So it was really having like a Black sister who I could talk to about race, and then her Black friends who I could also talk to. You know, she was older and she was in high school, and so she would have friends over and they would talk, they would do her hair, and it was just that type of like, I didn't necessarily have that in my school experiences until high school, but I could look forward to it, and I was already welcomed in that type of environment. I think if I didn't have her, it would have been a completely different story.
I would say my brother, not only being a Black man, but my younger brother, really, I don't know, was automatically eye-opening to the experience of being a Black woman versus, being a Black woman versus a Black man. And so, like Fiki said, like, I lived through him at some points, and he was automatically a pinpoint of someone I could go to if we just needed to talk stuff or like process anything. So I'm thankful for that, because at times it was very difficult and felt lonely. And to have just a built-in really helped. And even now, it still is really helpful.
Awesome. Well, I am going to take moderator's privilege and ask the final question. But I mean, we covered a lot of stuff in only a very short amount of time. And I mean, there are so many different topics that we can delve a lot deeper into when it comes to setting boundaries and just the bombardment of all these images. And I mean, we already knew that it was going on, but it seems like the public is finally coming up into like consciousness about it. But it is Black History Month, and with all other months, hopefully people are taking the time to educate themselves, not just this month, but extending it to 365 days. But how are you celebrating yourselves and taking care of yourselves?
I am, I'm consistently learning. I know there's a part of the Black experience I'm missing because I was a transracial adoptee in a predominantly white area, so I fall behind in some areas. And so I'm constantly looking out for facts during this month, or new information, or just staying up to date, or watching documentaries, or listening to podcasts, or anything like that. But how I celebrate myself is I remind myself I am valid. My experience is valid. I am important. I'm a Black woman. I'm proud. And just doing those daily sayings to just keep me grounded, and that I deserve a lot, especially during this month, which should be longer every day. But anyway.
I don't think a month should limit people to how much they can care about Black history. Like, they shouldn't be like, oh, this is 1 month, get all the Black people in front of everything, and then kind of stop it next month. What I'm doing is, so I have a few photos of myself that I look back, and every time I'm just like, damn, you look so nice. So a few of them I'm in like one Ethiopian outfit, and then some of them I'm at like these events, and it's just like, I mean, you just gain a sense of like empowerment looking at the photos, because you're like, I mean, I could have like a bad hair day or not like do my hair one day, and I could feel like depressed, and I would look back and I would be like, after everything that I've experienced with race and adoption, like, I have reached this point where I get to do this, and it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's sometimes you just need to recognize that self, or sometimes you just need to like treat yourself and go to Chipotle.
No, that's so good.
Oh no, we can't hear you, Mercedes. Mercedes, we can't hear you. Oh, oh no. She's not on mute either.
Maybe.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. My internet was cutting
It's
in.
okay. It's okay.
In a building that does that sometimes. But I think one of the biggest things for me this year I've learned is like there's not just one way to advocate. For me, going to protests and stuff, like I was just at a point where I was so burnt out emotionally, like mentally, physically. It wasn't a good thing. So I started doing a lot more. Like there's so much you can do from your house, even like being able to advocate for policy and being able to write letters to legislators and being able to like do some more of sharing your story in ways that feel meaningful. It doesn't always have to be you out on the front lines. It doesn't always have to be you out like screaming. And I think for me, that was a huge piece of self-preservation through all of this that I needed, was to be able to take a step back and give myself some space and some room to reflect and do things intentionally. And then I think like through this, like one of the big things is I got this great poster behind me.
I've been looking at that.
It says, be the kind of woman that makes other women want to push up their game. And so I think like one of the fun things I've been doing is like there's so many pictures of amazing Black advocates, and I don't know all of them. So like I think we get really stuck on like Martin Luther King, or like, you know, the 2 or 3 people that we know that are really like strong. But there's so many amazing people who have come so far and done so much. And when I think about them, like that makes me excited, because I'm like, man, like small actions can make really big impact, and like these people are so important. And so I think that's been a fun thing, like to celebrate, like, okay, well, I'm like doing little things. Like I could be one of them someday. I could be on this poster next to Michelle Obama.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I think that's, oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say a big thank you, Allie, for giving me, and maybe I can speak for all of us, this platform to speak.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Oh, well, I want to express a deep thank you just for volunteering your time to have this conversation too, because, and I think it's like really rare to get to have these conversations with people who have an innate understanding about pieces of our experiences and our existence. And it's always something I'm really grateful for, and I love celebrating.
Such an honor to share space with you ladies.
Yes.
With that, thank you for everyone who tuned in, and have a great rest of your week.